Let's TIG weld some aluminum.
Here's a little trick that I learned while working with Roy Crumrine. If you've got a tack all the way on the end and you light up on that tack, sometimes it'll pop loose. So putting another little tack just a ½ inch or so inboard and then going over it can save yourself a lot of heartaches and having to refit something and having a gap pop open in something. I'm trying to move the torch along roughly 1/8 inch at even increments, and I'm also trying to feed in the same amount of wire each time that I add wire to the puddle. If you do those two things while holding a fairly consistent arc length and torch angle, you'll get some good uniformity. Now I'm getting toward the end here and I'm backing off the foot pedal, then I'm backing up the arc to prevent leaving a crater as I back off the arc. Next up is a lap joint. A lot of people like to use a number 5 cup for aluminum. It works great for some applications. This is one of them where it works really nice, and it limits the etch line because the etch line will typically only go where there's argon coverage or shielding gas coverage. As I taper off the arc, I taper off amperage and swirl, again to keep from leaving crater cracks or a fisheye or some other type of defect. I don't always ball my electrode, but my Dynasty has a feature that allows me to ball it while leaving it on AC. Oftentimes I'll taper it slightly and then put just a rounded tip on it. That gives me a good focused arc, gives me good crisp arc starts at low amperage, and good cleaning action. For aluminum butt joints, a number 5 cup can actually help with penetration because it kind of focuses that arc energy into the puddle instead of into the cleaning action around it. You don't always have to have 100% penetration on every single butt joint, but when you do need 100% penetration on aluminum, a number 5 cup can help you get there. Again, it does focus that energy. So you can watch this puddle kind of sink a little bit in between dabs, and then it grows in height as I add filler metal. And so a lot of times I will move the electrode up and down slightly just to prevent that puddle from growing into the electrode and contaminating it and then having to stop and clean electrodes. Sometimes, especially for ornamental and architectural type stuff, the finish is an important factor, and sometimes it has to be sanded off. Sometimes the weld reinforcement has to be completely removed, in which case you might want to really sink it like I'm doing right here. I'm really letting that puddle sink so that after the fact I can come and sand that off and there'll still be a lot of metal, weld metal, holding the piece together. Sometimes you might also want to put a chamfer on something. Even 1/8 inch thick can benefit because that slight chamfer will really help with penetration. You won't always be able to put a chamfer, and you could definitely penetrate all the way through 1/8 inch without a chamfer. It's just that having an even halfway through bevel chamfer on there really directs the heat and really helps with penetration while using a little less heat and possibly distorting the part less. Here are the settings that I use with this number 6 cup. I usually want a little bit more amperage than I actually need so that I can get the puddle going quickly, and then as the part heats up, I back off amperage. That's very typical with aluminum. The amperage requirement changes a lot as the piece gets saturated with heat. This is a good example of me moving the electrode kind of up and down as that puddle sinks and then grows. That keeps me from having to clean electrodes, and it's just one technique that may not work for everybody, but it has worked for me. As I'm nearing the end of this piece, it's getting really hot, so I'm kind of leaving the rod in the puddle as I taper amperage just to keep from blowing that end away. One of the key factors that I've found really helps on T-joints is not using much torch angle at all, and of course holding a tight arc. But if you try to hold a tight arc with a lot of torch angle, oftentimes that puddle will grow right into the tip of your electrode, and you'll be cleaning electrodes a lot. Once again, I'm trying to move the torch ahead at even increments, all the while trying to add the same amount of filler wire each dab, and that all just takes intentional practice. And when you're learning on your own, it really helps to be able to watch a video over and over again. One thing that really helps is learning to feed filler wire with your filler wire hand, both hands actually, because there's times when you'll have to swap hands welding. But if you're having trouble in feeding filler wire, one of the best ways to get that filler wire hand up to speed is just padding beads on aluminum. All you really need is a small piece of aluminum, 1/8 inch or so thick, and you're off to the races. You don't have to clean in between beads. All you need to do is cool it off periodically and it gives you some of the best practice you can get. It's a very fundamental exercise, but some of the most advanced TIG welders I know still do this from time to time, if for no other reason just to make sure everything's working okay before they weld live parts.